My name, as Anne said, is Gerard McMurtry, and I'm the co-founder of the Teddington-based digital agency ActiveIS. In this session, I'll share advice on how you can improve the performance of your business websites. Obviously, businesses and websites are vary in scale from very small to very large. I've tried to give tips and advice which will be useful for you all. So what I thought I'd do just initially, just a quick introduction to myself. As Anne said, my background's in business systems analysis and software development. I was fortunate with timing to start working with the web in the mid-90s when I designed and built a number of solutions for Microsoft using their early web technologies for demonstrations to their UK customers. That was absolutely fascinating, got me hooked on the web, and loved the opportunities I could see for businesses. So I co-founded the digital agency ActiveIS to deliver web and online solutions, and the internet has grown, as you all know, since then. We've worked on many exciting web projects, large and small. Some memorable ones being the World Rally Series website. We ran that for a year. We've architected and built a couple of sites for Haymarket. You may have heard of What Car and Auto Sports over the years. We worked on lastminute.de and lastminute.fr. And we work with local organisations such as Ellis e-commerce for Ellis of Richmond, the wine organisation, numerous government websites, and then locally intranets for NHS Richmond and St Mary's University. And we've been a member of the Chamber for 5 years now. I can't believe it's such a long time. What I've got today is a checklist. Now, Anne's obviously asked me to rattle through because we're sort of a bit over on time. So hopefully, Anne, you'll be able to share these slides with the audience should they want to have a look at them in more detail later.
Actually, what we're doing is bite-size pieces that will be shared with the business community across the Twickenham area. So
okay,
that's all cool.
Okay, cool. So basically, how people ask, are there any sort of economical ways to sort of build a smarter online presence? The most cost-effective way of doing it, I'd say, is invest in the advice of an expert and then agree with them what you can do and what they can do, because some areas you will be able to handle yourselves, but there's going to be areas where you do need specialist help, and often that can be quite cost effective and end up with a much better product, much better site. When you're planning changes to your website, consider how they will affect your business, your brand, your products and services, and particularly your target audiences. The success of a website typically comes down to successfully delivering to those target audiences. I'm assuming you've already got great products and services because that's why you're in business. You should have content on your website which signposts visitors to what you want them to achieve on your website, your goals, your calls to action. Do you want them to register an account, sign up for a newsletter, or buy a product? Your site needs to look and work well on all devices, particularly nowadays, smartphones, mobile devices, tablets. Desktop computers are used by some audiences, typically older, but you've got to look at your audience and think, what are they using to view your website on, and make sure it works really well on those devices. Make sure your web pages are easy to find by following best search engine optimization practice. Use online marketing, social marketing, paid marketing. And also from a technical point of view, and this is something I'm passionate about, your website needs to be safe, fast, and reliable. Nobody likes visiting a slow or unreliable website, and it's really important to get the technology and the hosting right. Right, so I'll hand on to content first. So basically, your content needs to focus on how your products and services benefit your customers. Don't just list out features of products, focus on why somebody should be using them. That's what they really want to know. What are the benefits? Who is your audience? Who are they? What do they want from you? How will they access your website? How will they contact you? You need to think about all those things and make sure that your website fulfills them to get the greatest audience participation. You need to, when you're designing a website, you need to look at the information architecture. What pages do you want on your website? What do you need to show people? What are people going to do? What's the user experience? How are they going to interact with your website? And then, using your brand guidelines, you need to design it so your brand is consistent on the web and with all your other marketing materials. You need to think about making your content consistent with your brand and easy to use by your audience. Content, I mean written content, images, and video, which have all been discussed earlier. Yeah. Often, less content, but more focused content is better. Yeah, sometimes keeping it short is better. Think about how to highlight call to action buttons on your website. Make them stand out. Often using green or orange, helps. For example, booking the tickets for this webinar, the tickets button is green, and it's also visible at all times on your web page. So Eventbrite basically decided, right, that's the most important thing on this web page. That's what we want to focus our users on. It's going to be there all the time, and it's going to be obvious. It stands out from everything else. So think about that when you're designing. Make it easy for your audience to contact you. That's really, really important. Have sign-up forms, web chat, social media links, really important. Also, don't hide your contact details. You see some websites, there's no address, sometimes there's no company number, company name, and it just sort of makes the website feel a little bit untrustworthy. So be open and upfront who your business is, who you are, and share that with your customers, because it will give them confidence. And other things, when you're building your website, simple things like, to help making it fast, optimize images on your web pages, host your videos on big hosting video channels such as YouTube or Vimeo. Don't try putting a video onto your website, because typically it will slow it down. It's best to use one of these massive content streaming platforms, which are tailored for making sure your video technically runs smoothly. And yeah, optimize your images. I mean, Photoshop Elements is available for £70. Using that to make your images small, make sure your website page load times are fast. And also something which is a bugbear, some small websites try to get a little bit of revenue by adding sort of third-party ads, but do try to avoid them, because they more than often annoy your visitors. Search engine optimization. There's no magic single solution for getting to the top of search engine results, but there's lots of little incremental steps which you can implement to make sure that your website stands a good chance. And this is before you start considering paid ads on Google or Bing, and that's not a subject I'm going to cover today. So if you think about it, websites, web search engines now are very advanced, and they're optimized to read a web page like a human does. So if a web page is clear for a human, it's likely going to be very good for SEO. So, make sure you're using sensible page titles that someone might try and search for about your business. Contact us, about us. Product names, make it really easy for them to find you, because if that's what's written on your page, that's what's going to be in the search engine. Another thing is try and focus on a single subject for a content page. So have a content page about each product. Don't try and put 2 or 3 on the same page, because the search engine won't know which of those products that page is about. The title should be about one product. It should have the images, and the rest of the content should focus on that single product to give that page the greatest chance of being high up in search results. Also, don't try and use any SEO tricks, because they'll get your site blacklisted. Wasn't that many years ago that BMW in Germany engaged an SEO optimization company who managed to get BMW banned from several of the large search engines for a while? Not very clever. Don't try them. The search engines are too smart now. What I mean by that is perhaps hiding copy words, forcing words into the site and putting the words on the pages in the same color as the background, so a human can't see them, but they're still there. Smartphones have been mentioned before. Smartphones. If your audience is using smartphones, then your website needs to be optimized for smartphones. If it isn't mobile friendly, you're very unlikely to appear high up in search results from a smartphone, if at all. It's quite possible, because Google ranks on optimization for smartphones very highly. If someone searches for you, unless they put the name of your company in there, but if they're looking for a generic product, they won't find you. When you're optimizing for search engines such as Google and Bing, the main ones, you also need to analyze what's happening on your site. You need to look at, who's visiting it, who's visiting what pages, what are they doing on your site, what devices they're using, are they coming from mobile, are they coming from desktop? And the simplest way of doing that, which is pervasive throughout the world, is adding Google Analytics to your website. It's free. The important thing, though, is Google Analytics records your performance. You or an expert needs to analyze what it's doing and look at them compared to the goals you've set for your website, the calls to action. And then you need to make changes to your website to improve the performance. And it's a continual cycle of record the results, monitor those, review them, and then optimize and change your website. So once you've created a new website, don't think of it as that's done. Look at your stats after a few weeks, months, and update it to make sure it works better for your business. Another really neat feature for tracking what's happening on your website, how people are using it, is heat maps. And they're like pictures of your website pages as if you were looking through an infrared camera, so a bit different colors. And typically red, really hot, is what people are clicking on. And it sort of covers your web page, and you can see what people are doing on your site and literally what they're clicking on. And that's a very good tool. They are typically paid for. They're not terribly expensive, but it's certainly, when you launch a new website or launch some new pages or launch some new features on your site, it's worth investing in so that you can see what people are doing. And perhaps you end up seeing they're scrolling and looking for content. Perhaps you then need to move the content to a different place on the page. But those are really, really useful tools, heat maps. Some points on social networks. So there are many social networks. Many have been mentioned before: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, this new phenomenon, TikTok. You need to choose two things, really. What's most appropriate for your business? What are you likely to best connect with your audience? Is it video content? Is it messages on Facebook? You need to understand who your audience is and what they use. And that's going to be really critical for you selecting which is the most appropriate channel. But you also need to think, what resources do you have to manage the communications that you get on those channels? How many hours of staff's time can be spent on managing this? Who's going to do it? It's really important when people are contacting you on your website and over social networks to respond quickly and appropriately. You might have different people doing outbound media posts to those answering customer inquiries. You need to work out who's appropriate, whether you can engage specialist agencies or whether it's people within your business. But as mentioned earlier, it can be quite an expensive and labor intensive to do this. So perhaps limiting the number of channels you use is a cost-effective way of doing that. Another important way of, not quite social network, but managing communications, which we've seen has become very popular and very successful for customers in the last few years, is web chat. You can use add features like Talk to, the website that's on the slide, which are free for most of their services, and they enable you to have one or more users in your organization pick up chats with your customers. Again, you can respond in real time on that. I've seen that used in call centers. Really popular. In fact, it's been more sort of a game for some of their internal staff. They're all rushing to see who can pick up the chat and then respond to the customer first. So it's actually been used with quite a lot of enthusiasm internally in some organizations I've seen. Other things for social and online presence: make sure that your business has a Google account. Make sure you've got a Bing account. Make sure in those you set your exact location on a map. Not quite as relevant now for many businesses, but make sure that that spot on the map on Google and Bing is actually where your business is, and you can set that in your Google and Bing accounts. Similarly, opening hours. Set your opening hours. You'll get an email from them before a bank holiday weekend, so probably we'll get one next week before Easter saying, what are your Easter opening hours? Make sure you're updated on the sites. There's nothing worse than you're sitting at home and saying, right, when's this going to be open? And you search on your phone, oh, this business is open this time in the current pandemic, perhaps I'll call them, and then you call them and there's no answer because the opening hours.
Yeah. Can I ask you to rattle on now, because
okay.
Please, because I'm conscious of the next 3 speakers.
Okay, so e-commerce, you've covered a lot of that today. Basically, I'm not discussing any suitability of platforms, but there are many. But really, you need to look at how the different platforms, the methods of doing e-commerce suit your business. There are marketplaces like Amazon, eBay, Etsy, not on the high street, based in Richmond. There are platforms where you can build a full e-commerce site, Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento, and there's plugins which you can add into your current website. You need to work out what's most appropriate for you. Also, make sure your customers can pay with multiple options. Be flexible for them, make it easy for them to pay. Credit cards, debit cards, Apple Pay, Google Pay, PayPal. Next. Final slide, website security and hosting. It's not very sexy, but it's really, really important. And for example, last week, there was an alert for the WordPress content management system, which is very popular, for a plugin called the WordPress Super Cache, which makes your WordPress website work faster. There was a hack, there was an important update put on, affected 2 million sites. So if you have got a WordPress website and you haven't updated it, go and check for WordPress Super Cache. And if you have got it, just get it updated. There's lots of things to do. Regular patching, which I mentioned with WordPress. Your website should be patched at least once a month and in response to security alerts. Make sure your web pages are encrypted using SSL certificates. Make sure your websites are backed up. Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Have you talked to that with your hosting company? What happens if there was a server farm in the continental Europe 2 weeks ago? The whole server farm burnt down. A lot of data was lost. What's your disaster recovery plan if that worst were to happen? Consider penetration testing. This is done to see if a hacker could get into your website and change your website, deface it, or access your customer data. Site speed's important, so having fast hosting environment is really key. Nobody likes a slow website. If your website's too slow, people will just go somewhere else. Check your SLAs for your hosting, and also make sure you or your agency, if you use one, have got monitors set up to check to check your website every few minutes to make sure it's up, and if there's a problem, send you an alert by text or phone. And that really is a quick summary, Anne, of it.